This is episode 137 of The Variety Artist. This is John Abrams, your host, and that guy that interviews successful variety artists from around the world every single week. This is my first two-parter. This discussion took so many twists and turns that I had to make two separate episodes. You're going to hear all about his quote unquote normal childhood, all sorts of crazy stories about his career, and learn that there's much more to this comedy magician than meets the eye. Enjoy!
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
CBS News says awesome. LA Times says hilarious. He's appeared on all 8 seasons of the CW's Master of Illusions. I could go through his list of credits, but that'd take the entire time. Let's get into it. Variety artist, I give you comedy magician Chipper Lowell.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Chipper?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. This is going to be so much fun. And I have to tell you, unsolicited, you have these long drives going from show to show. And I had a long drive from Tahoe heading back home to Southern California. And I wound up getting on a binge and listening to about 5 or 6 of your podcasts in the past. And it was great. They were great. I loved it. You asked the right questions. They were informative. Yeah. So bravo to you. Great job.
Thanks. I love it. I just have fun with the people. In fact, I get to meet my heroes, which is a bonus for me. I get to meet people that I've never met before, that I've never even talked to before. So I'm excited about that all the time.
Sorry, this will be a letdown, but
do you know my side of the story of how we first met?
No. Well, I don't think I do. Go ahead.
So here's what happened. Your wife, Lisa, hired me for a show because she was part of the PTA for her school, for your kid's school, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So then a few weeks later, I was doing a show at a library. I was talking to Lisa and we were just talking, chatting back and forth. And she goes, "Oh, you may know my husband." And I said, "Oh, who's that?" And she says, "Oh, Chipper Lowell." I said, "Well, I don't know him, but I know who he is." So sure enough, at that library show, there you are sitting with your wife and kid at the library show, right?
And I do remember that. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And it was a great show. You put on thanks. A really great show. Yeah. Wow. That was a while ago. I'm trying to think. I
think that was 10 years ago.
Yes, it's gotta be because our son is in his second year of college right now. So,
and he was a kid,
a total kid. And we have a picture of him with a snake around his neck. Thanks to you.
Oh, that's funny. I retired all my critters except for that snake.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is true during the COVID thing. The snake is 22 years old and I couldn't in good conscience give it to somebody because they only live to be 20.
Oh man. But it's hard to tell, the age of a snake. They look the same.
Yeah, they do.
I've never seen a wrinkly snake or, unless you just iron them out or something.
I only know that because the snake is the same age as my daughter. So whenever the daughter has a birthday, the snake has a birthday. All right, well, let's get into you. Enough about me. What about your childhood? Because you had quite a colorful childhood without giving anything away. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives on my childhood because for me it was normal because that's all I knew. I was born on the East Coast, and a couple of weeks later I was taken back out on the road because my parents were circus performers. My dad was a clown with Ringling Brothers, like we're talking heyday of Ringling back in the 50s and 60s. My dad literally was one of the last remaining clowns until he passed away last year of that golden age of clowning, long before there was a clown college. And he was there during the transition of Ringling going from circus tent, slowly transitioning into playing arenas.
So how did that influence you?
Interestingly enough, I absolutely loved traveling. That's what our life was like. So we lived in a 30-foot trailer and we went all over the world. If we weren't in the United States and Canada and Mexico, we traveled over to England and Australia and New Zealand. We toured with large arena shows like Disney on Parade, which was the very first big arena show that Disney produced. My dad consulted on it. And my dad was producing clown on that show for the Dumbo Circus segment, as well as other characters. My dad was also the Wicked Stepmother for the Cinderella segment.
Now, at this time that they were performing, you're a little kid, so are you performing also?
No, at this point, I'm just about 8, 9, 10 years old. And I do show up for my first performance. I think I was 7 years old, and I did go around in Dumbo Circus on the fire engine with full clown costume and makeup and waving to everybody. So that probably is my first time, and I just loved it. There was not one bit of it that was nervous or anxiety ridden, because to me, that's what every family did. You know, you're small enough to think like everyone's in show business.
It's totally normal. Totally normal.
It's completely normal.
Everybody's dad's a clown.
My mom had an iron jaw act where she hung by her teeth, several stories in the air, and I was the person down below pointing up at her, posing like ta-da, and I would hand her props and juggling equipment and ribbons and streamers for her to do her act. Again, I just assumed that was normal, and we would do that 8 to 10 months out of the year. And then we had a home in Southern California, and the neighborhood kids who were good friends of mine whenever I was home would say, "Hey, you want to come over to our house for dinner?" And I'd be, "Yeah, sure." And then I'd go talk to my dad and say, "They're really weird. They're having dinner at 6 o'clock, not like at midnight. What's wrong with them?" And my dad would say, "No, that's what normal people do." Yeah. We had an A-frame aerial rigging in our backyard. And one of the best stories, which I love telling, is we had new neighbors move in next door, and they called the police because there was a woman hanging herself. They looked over the fence and called 911 or whatever it was. And we were kind of the Addams family of the neighborhood.
Well, it's funny, as entertainers, we tell stories like the one you just told, or my story earlier about a snake, and we think, oh, it's completely normal. That's what everybody does. That's how I felt too, and that's how my kids felt when they were younger, because their father, of course, myself, was a magician.
Exactly.
What about schooling on the road?
I grew up with mostly adults around me, so when I finally went to regular public school, I did correspondence school on the road. There was a school out of Baltimore, Maryland called Calvert, and it was designed for people with kids who traveled, dignitaries, missionaries, show business people. So I got the equivalent of a high school education wherever I was, but I never had the aspects, or the environment of what a regular school was. And there were newspaper articles written about me where they would say Cinderella is Chipper's teacher, because the lady who played Cinderella in the large arena show happened to also have a teaching degree. And so in the dressing rooms, 2 to 4 hours a day, she'd be teaching me my courses, my studies.
Yeah, so Cinderella is your teacher.
It was very normal. Cinderella was my teacher. And the fact that the press would be there. I'm like, oh, is it another press thing? Okay. It was...
That's interesting. So when other people are 20 years old or 25 years old and they get nervous because the press is around, you just had them around the whole time. So it's not that big of a deal.
It really wasn't. And, later on in my own career, when there were articles written, or if I have to appear on a local TV show or news channel for promoting either my show or Masters of Illusion or other shows that I'm involved with, I love it.
So you're raised by your parents, of course, and then you move out. So tell me about your roommates.
I know. Well, I moved out when I was 17. My roommates were the wonderful Kevin James, magician Kevin James, and then also Nicholas Knight, another fantastic magician. And both of them very, very creative. So the three of us, that house was just filled with us running down the hallway to each other going, "Hey, what do you think of this? What about this idea? Hey, let's do this." We had a garage that we put in plexiglass mirrors along one wall that became the rehearsal studio for us to see what things would look like. I would bring a girl home, after a date. A typical night would be me walking her into the living room, and Kevin would be producing a samurai sword with a bunch of sparkles and fire and confetti because he was working on something. Some girls I dated would be freaked out, and others would be like, "Okay, this is the best place ever." Yeah. It was referred to as the Magic House, and later on, as occupants changed, it became the Jester House, where juggler Michael Hawley, and also Peter Heitoff, who I think is now out of the business, So yeah, I mean, my gosh, the amount of creativity, and then of course all our friends coming over. It was the epicenter of variety in Orange County at the time.
I tell people that's what I want at my funeral. When I die,
Yeah.
I'm going to have all of my entertainer friends appear and do like a 2-minute act.
Oh my gosh.
And just entertain the audience. Wouldn't that be a great funeral?
Oh yeah. And again, it takes people from the outside to sort of remind me, even now, even to this day, to remind me that my life is a little different and not the norm. And our son is the same as I'm sure your daughter's, in the sense that there was a time at school when they said after summer, I think this is maybe he was in 4th or 5th grade or something. And they said, everyone tell us. Oh, I know what it was. It was early on, where they're trying to explain to kids where they lived. This is the town you live in. The town is part of this county. This county is in this state, and we're part of the United States. And they said to each kid, so where do you live? And everyone's answering. And so they get to my son, Ethan, and they said, where do you live? And he says, Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, New York. And he goes on this long, and they said, no. Like where do you sleep? Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe. And he goes through this long list again. And they said, no, like your place, your apartment or your house. And he just went on this long list. So we go to pick him up, and we said, how's he doing? And the teacher said, well, he's great, but he's got this vivid imagination that we just have to kind of figure out. And I said, well, I asked them what was going on. They explained it. And I said, no, that's exactly where we've lived. He's had apartments and hotels and hotel suites, like 20 different places.
Wow. No, I don't get that. I had a similar experience when they asked my kids, what does your dad do for a living? And they say, well, he's a magician. That's what he does for a living. And they're, no, really, what does he really do for a living? No, he's a magician. That's what he does for a living. No, real musician? No, magician. This is what he does for a living.
Right. No. How does he make money? I'm telling you, magician. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he does. All right, so I've counted at least 16 different TV shows that you've done and movie credits, at least 32 stage productions and reviews, and at least 12 cruise lines, fairs, and attractions.
Wow, that makes me feel old.
Experienced. You were kind of raised with it, but how does a person go from just general magician, balloon artist, whatever it is, to doing stages, TV, movies?
Well, I kind of had my foot in comedy clubs for a long time. And then the other foot was in variety, magic, and juggling. And very quick, my succession went from doing birthday parties. I went from doing that to auditioning for the Royal Court Jesters at Disneyland. And from there, jumped onto cruise ships, hated it. Really? I only did about half a year of cruise ships. And then from there, immediately started doing review shows. So I went to Atlantic City, wound up doing 4 or 5 different shows there. Mark Kornhauser discovered me.
Well, are a lot of these bookings, are they coming from agents? Or are they coming from yourself?
They're coming from agents, from managers. They're coming from my connections. The Mark Kornhauser booking was completely out of the blue. He happened to see me perform and recommended me to the producer of the show that he was in. I got rid of certain management that were just shysters and just awful. Kind of just jumped around. I mean, right now, my schedule is that I've got exclusive agents that book me for cruises, because I went back into cruising because cruises got better. If I've got projects to do, usually I'm doing editing and other projects for myself on the ship, that just to pass the time.
What does your schedule look like now?
I got to say, most of my stuff these days is my solo show, which is the Chipper Experience, where comedy and magic collide. That's been a theater show that's been running for 20 plus years, performing arts centers and theaters throughout the US and Canada, touring with larger stage shows like Masters of Illusion, which I'm doing right now in Atlantic City. Oh, also did Circus 1903.
That looked great.
That was so much fun.
And it's right up your alley too. Circus.
Oh yeah.
You play the master of ceremonies, right? Or
you are the role is that you're the circus proprietor, owner of the circus, and then you become the ringmaster of the show. as it goes along. For those that don't know, Circus 1903 is a theatrical version of what a circus would be like in the year 1903. Everything looks very vintage. And I had to change some of my own routines that I do in the show to fit that time period as well, making things look like they're all made out of wood.
Yeah.
The role was originated by David Williamson, who's absolutely fantastic.
Another terrific
And just funny as hell. I saw the show in Vegas, and he was the one that said to me, "You should do this role." And I said, I actually, because I also at times wear a producer hat, I was the first to go, no. I like David. I can only picture you in it. It's great. Also, David's like 7 foot. I'm 5,
and you're not.
I'm like 5'6", 5'7" with a good pair of shoes. I just don't picture myself doing it. He goes, "Oh, no, you'd be great at it." And it was literally a little over a year later that he asked me again. And I said, "No, you know what? I can bring my own spin to this. It's just, it's in the background. If Williamson's schedule, if he's got conflicts, then I'll step in. But otherwise, I'm also busy with my own stuff."
Tell us, you have any crazy stories about being on set or on stage?
Always. I've got tons.
Give us one or give us a couple.
There was the time that, early in my career, I was the first assistant for Mark Kalin. When Mark Kalin decided to be an illusionist, we did several television shows, one of which was That's Incredible.
I remember that.
With Davidson and I forgot Fran Tarkenton and other hosts.
Oh, yeah.
We did an illusion where, let's just say, I turn magically into a giant Bengal tiger. I'm hidden away in the prop, and the Bengal tiger on camera decides to pee. So I'm basically drowning in a secret compartment. It's very acidy, so I'm almost going unconscious. At the end of the shoot, the producers of the show and Mark and the rest of the crew take the big giant illusion and roll it off backstage out to the alley. And when they open up the secret compartment, me and a bunch of cat piss pours out. And I'm laughing hysterically because I just think that stuff's freaking funny.
It is.
And the producers at the time were having a tiff with the lady. I can't remember her full name, but she was something Crosby. Gosh, is it
Kathy Crosby?
Kathy Lee Crosby? Is that it? Kathy Crosby?
Yes, that's it.
She was being really rude on the set that day. She just would not give the producers like a second or third take when introducing something for the cameras. So she left early. And so the producers looked at each other and they tossed me some keys and they said, "Here, why don't you use Kathy's dressing room to clean up?"
Oh!
Says, "Make sure to use the shower and every towel she has in there." So it was their passive aggressive way of getting back at her.
I would have liked to see the video of her going back into her room.
I would pay huge amount of money to see that because what's that? Because you don't just get the the smell of cat piss out in 2 seconds. Yeah.
It's big cat piss.
It's big.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's not little.
Actually,
cat.
That's good to say because I just think of cats as big, because those are the cats I grew up with.
Oh, that's right. Because it's totally normal to you.
Totally normal. I mean, on the show as a kid, I would go and wrestle the cats, little lion cubs and stuff, and I'd come back to the trailer, and my mom would see my legs completely scarred up with blood oozing from their claws and stuff, and say, "Were you playing with the cats again?" I'm like, "No," and I would get grounded in the trailer for a couple of weeks. But yeah, there's been a lot of things where I've fallen off stages. Where working with Mark, we had a costume malfunction where one of the female assistants' costumes was exposed to a family audience where she was completely naked.
Oh,
that was at a theme park, and we thought, "Oh my gosh, we're going to get fired." And instead, we got more letters about how great the show was. And all we could think of is like dads in the audience writing, going, "That was the best show.
That was so good. Didn't expect that."
I think that's why I like the business, is that there's always going to be a story about something happening, something take place.
Okay, I have to tell this story.
Sure.
So, as you know, I did animal magic with live exotic pets, and I used to do magic with a little flying squirrel, a little sugar glider.
Wow.
I do a show for the Cub Scouts. The leader of the Cub Scouts wears a Cub Scout uniform.
Yeah.
They have the shorts and the Cub Scout outfit. After I do the show, the Cub Scout leader says, well, can I see your sugar glider? Can I see your little flying squirrel? I said, yeah, no problem. Here it is. So a little flying squirrel is about the size of my hand.
Okay.
It's a little bigger than the size of my hand. So I pull him out, and the sugar glider jumps off of my hand, lands on this guy's crotch, right in his shorts, and holds on for dear life. And the noise this thing makes, it goes, that's the noise that this little, so it's holding on, it's staring at me, it's like, and I don't know what to do. I mean, what am I going to grab it? I don't know what to do. So that's my story. Eventually it walked down his leg and I grabbed it and put it away. But things always happen.
Right. And that's the thing, the old adage of never work with animals or kids. Yeah. Here you are doing kid shows with animals. Of course, you're putting the two things together in a huge, dangerous combo, which is fantastic.
It's either fantastic or dangerous and horrible.
Yeah.
I can't quite figure it out.
What are the odds of it jumping off? What are the odds of it attaching itself to someone's scrotum? That's great.
That was crazy. Yeah. Crazy. Off that subject, when you're putting together a new comedy routine,
yeah.
Are you looking for certain things? Do you have a certain formula? How do you start that process?
The very last thing is always going to be method. I think sometimes magicians think method first, and I'm like, that. Who cares? Because as we know, there's a lot of magic that, as clever as a certain trick may be, it may just be horribly boring. It may be completely uninteresting, not entertaining. It doesn't grab the audience. And you have to get rid of those. And I think that's a huge problem. So for me, it starts from just a funny idea. Is this funny? Is this something that the audience, would laugh at? Then I work backwards. I give it a couple days. I let it ferment and run around in my brain. Is it still funny to me? Yep, still funny. Okay. All right. Now, that's not going to be enough because that's just a one joke concept. Can I bring it in and make a full routine with an actual plot? Because for me, comedy has to hang on a plot. A perfect example, if someone's doing a trick with a dollar bill, you can just tell that they've run to the joke book. Here's all the jokes dealing with money. I'm going to put them in there. Yeah. And so you're getting all the things like, hey, do you want to know how to double your money? Look, I folded it in half, all that. And it means nothing because it's not moving the actual plot along. If anything, it's stopping the plot from moving forward. So I really feel that good comedy and routines are plot driven. Even if the plot is as simple as bringing somebody up to help out, you've got a plot there because somebody is coming up, helping out with it. What you're trying to do is find reasons for the audience to connect to the routine and to connect to you and to connect to what's happening. The most simplest form is them putting their signature on a dollar bill, right? If we're still talking about a dollar bill. But that's not enough. Right now, it's still just a signature. Let's talk about the person on stage. Where are they from? What do they do? The more that you introduce humanity into a routine, the more that you can pull from. I'm going to have different jokes if the person I brought up is a doctor, who has then scribbled their initial on the dollar bill. And I say, wow, I can't even read this. You're right. You are a doctor, making a joke about prescriptions or things like that. So it's got to be concept first. Then I will write out a very skeleton, kind of a skeleton outline of what I want to do. And if it's still not working, I do not go forward with it until I know that story works.
How do you make the entire story funny?
I want to throw as many obstacles in the way of the story. So oftentimes I explain it this way, that what are the most exciting car chase scenes you remember from movies? Well, if it's simply one car chasing another car, that means nothing. Speed, right. Okay, they're going faster than normal. That's a little something more. But what else is? Oh, there's traffic. I'm going in and around cars. Oh, okay, now it's more exciting. Now you have the cliche of someone with a vegetable cart crossing, and their cart gets run over, and the person's yelling. Someone else. There's a mother with a baby stroller. There's the guy in one of the cars. Maybe they're going downhill and he realizes his brakes are gone. He no longer has brakes. Oh, the steering wheel came off. He doesn't even know how to be able to command and drive and steer the car. So you're adding in all of these, what I call speed bumps, that only escalates the comedy of what you can do with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete
sense.
I
was never a fan of the old "look what I can do and you can't." I just hated that, and I always quote the Jerry Seinfeld joke about him saying, "I hate magicians because all they are is, here's a coin, now it's gone, you're a jerk." And it's true, because there's a vast majority of performers that kind of come from it of look what I can do and you can't, as opposed to really making it personable, learning about the performer on stage.
Well, what else can we do to make it more personable?
I loved the spectacle of circus when I was growing up in and around it. What I hated was the fact that once a circus act was done, you still knew nothing about them. It was like old variety shows, people being on the Ed Sullivan Show. They come out and it's and they do it, and they're spinning 20 plates and they're taking a bow. And at the end, I went, great. I saw some person spin 20 plates. I never said, oh my gosh, I love that person. I want to meet that person. I want to have dinner with that person. And my goal in any of my shows is I want people to come up with me and say, oh my God, that was great. Listen, come on over to the house with the family. We'd love to have you over for dinner. That's my goal. I really want them to kind of have a really good sense of who I am through the routines and stuff that I do on stage.
I interviewed yesterday Buster Balloon.
Yeah.
And he said the same thing. Similar thing. By the time I'm done, I want them to know who I am.
Absolutely. Everything we do is simply a tool to get to that point and not the reverse. We should not be there because of the prop or the tool. The tool or the prop is there to help us bring our personality forward and to help us entertain. Otherwise, you might as well be, more of a prop comic that just brings out a funny prop and you put it away and bring out another funny prop, put it away, whereby that then means that anybody can do the job.
In your own career, was there a piece or routine that you finished and said, okay, this is it. Okay, now this is the routine. I'm going to start doing theaters, and now I'm going to really start making my living and doing it. Was there one particular piece that you said, this is it? Yeah,
but let me say with a caveat that it's never finished. I think any routine that's out there is never, ever finished. I think it's death to go, yep, that's it, we're done. You just can't, because time moves on, whether it's society, what's going on. There may be things you drop, there's things you add. There may be topical bits of business you can add in that are only good for a week or two or a couple months and you take out.
Yeah.
I've always looked at my routines as, can I make them signature pieces? So I really take pride in creativity and trying to be as unique as possible, because the truth is, and boy, if there's something I can pass along to anybody, it's this: the more that you are unique, the more that you stand alone, be it your personality, your routines, the style in which you perform, the magic, all of that, your bookings go way up.
This may be kind of personal, but what about pricing?
It is extremely rare that someone calls me these days and says, what's your price? And that's the thing that you want to get to. Instead, they're calling to say, we would like Chipper at this event. They're not saying, we would like a magician at this event. And that's been a hard, long road to get to. But again, I'm old and it's been decades.
That does go back to the advice that we were talking about, Buster Balloon and yourself. You've branded yourself as Chipper Lowell. You're not a magician that happens to be doing tricks. you're Chipper Lowell. You're the guy that they want.
Yeah.
You've spent years creating that brand.
It's a heightened version of myself. The very first routine that I knew was a signature routine was my cigar box routine. And to put it plainly, is a find a card type thing, but it's got such a strong finale ending to it for that. And then another one was Binky the Educated Turtle, which is a supposedly educated turtle in a box that I'm going to do a routine with, but the turtle hates me and I hate the turtle. And so we get into a fight, and at the end, I push him into a small cannon, which he gets shot out of. When I reach into the cannon, all that's left is a shell. It's very cartoon-like. There's literally a shell that I put my hand through, and I'm embarrassed by it. I asked the sound people to stop the music, and now you hear a whistle, and now floating down from the top of the stage is a turtle in long red underwear parachuting down. I try to make every routine a standalone. I think a lot about water cooler talk, in that people come see a show on the weekend. They come to a big performing arts center and they see my show, and then they go back to work on Monday, and at lunch or around the water cooler, they go, "Oh my gosh, we saw this show. It was so great. We had such a great time." And this is the key point I'm about to say when they say this. "Oh, but you should have seen it the night we saw it." Because in their eyes, they thought they saw something, and maybe they did, whether I was improvising or ad-libbing. But if I bring up somebody that happens to be a fireman or a heart surgeon or a lumberjack, or they just got off working the big oil rigs up from Canada, or whatever, that show is going to go in a completely different direction. My show's designed with a little bit of jazz in it, in that I've got a set list, but if I need to, I can jump from various things, and I can add in routines and delete routines. I want them to go, "Wow, we actually got to see something even more special that night of that performance." Maybe something went, or had the appearance that it went spectacularly wrong in all the great humorous ways. And there have been I've challenged people, and people have challenged me to impromptu arm wrestling on the spot, and Indian leg wrestling, and other things that you're just like, that would never in a million years. We've had small children being hoisted throughout the audience as if they could get the feel of what a rock concert's going to be like when they reach 20. It's just like, "Oh, well, you know what, let's simulate it now," so you get that out of your system. People love to go on those journeys. Something's going to happen that's just happening right then.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about everything that you're saying is that I introduce you as the comedy magician. And so we're talking about magic, but all the things you're talking about, audience participation, having a kid in the audience, doing all this stuff, those are the things that the people remember. They don't remember cool ring trick that you did.
They're not coming out saying about the magic. They're really coming out saying, there's a couple of things where they go, I still don't know how you did that. I don't know. But what they're thinking in those terms is,
of course,
like an engineer, analytical. But the emotional part really is coming from what was the emotion they felt during this routine. The reason the show is called The Chipper Experience is not because of me. It's because it's an experience. It's not just a show. We are saying, look, get away from your life. Get away from everything else you've got going on. I don't know what troubles you've gone through. I don't know how easy or hard life is. But for the next 2 hours, take a break.
Entertainment's so underrated. I'm saying this as an entertainer. It's so underrated. Entertainment is underrated.
It is underrated. When 9/11 took place, the show I was doing closed down for 3 days. And on the 4th day, they said, "We have to start up again." And I was the one going, nope, I'm not there yet. And they said, "Nope, we're going to do it." I begrudgingly went into the theater, begrudgingly set up my props. I was hating every aspect of it. I got on stage, did my show, audience loved it.
Yeah.
And at meet and greet out in the lobby, every single person came up, tears in their eyes, saying, "Oh my God, you have no idea how much we needed that."
Yeah.
And I then, tears in my eyes, said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know how much I needed it and how much it meant to other people," because we are the thing that gets us back from those days.
And we're going through that
We're
now.
going through it right now. There was a huge emotional amount of people when we first opened the run here in Atlantic City. Here's a live theater. We're in a 1,600 seat theater doing 6 shows a week. And afterwards they would come up and say, oh my gosh, you don't know how good it felt just to hear me laughing with other people around me.
Yeah. Now switching gears a little bit, tell me about Autism Awareness. Tell me about your work with Autism Awareness.
Well, our son is high functioning autistic. His name's Ethan. You've met him.
Yep.
And great kid. He was diagnosed just before age 3. He was at 2.5 years old. He was in special education for the first couple of years of elementary school. And then gradually we would mainstream him into a regular classroom for just like an hour. If he was having trouble with it or was having a meltdown, he could go back to the other class. Little by little, he was mainstreamed for 2 hours, 3 hours. By 4th, 5th grade, he was mainstreamed pretty much the entire time into a regular classroom with an aide by his side. It's a huge emotional roller coaster for parents dealing with that. Lisa and I fought all the time once he was diagnosed, because I wanted what's best for him and I thought that I knew, and she wanted what's best for him and she thought she knew. And we were just at odds until we looked at all the statistics that said that anywhere from 75 to 98% of couples that have a special needs child either separate or divorce.
Wow.
We were like, well, wait a minute, that's not us. We're still madly in love. Let's sit down and figure this out. And we realized that what we didn't have was an actual game plan. We didn't have a plan in place. And I said jokingly, let's set this up like a business. Let's call this Ethan Incorporated. Let's figure out what our policy is of how we approach stuff. When something doesn't work, what is our policy together on what we want to do with this? And we mapped it all out. And literally the very next day we stopped fighting, because we realized that it had nothing to do with our love for each other. We both knew that we both wanted the absolute best for Ethan, and that wasn't that someone loved him more than the other person. Yeah. We wanted to be there. And so we rolled our sleeves up and really went after it. And it's been that way through a lot. And we've had ups and downs, as any family would, with children and parenting in general, but then to have the other layer of that, of having a child whose brain works slightly different. The meltdowns, stuff can be extremely overwhelming for someone on the spectrum than it is for a normal, as they say, typical versus atypical person. I wanted him to be prepared for what the real world was as well. Sure. Because being high functioning autistic, it's not like he's running around in a wheelchair.
Right.
So it's kind of that thing where you have to talk to him for a little bit to go, oh, okay, something's up with him.
Sure.
So to get him to understand how life, like I would be overly sarcastic with him in a fun way, because I wanted him to understand sarcasm, because he was so trusting of people around him that if people on the schoolyard said, hey, Ethan, I don't think you can run across the street really fast, touch that telephone pole and run back.
Uh-oh.
And he would go, oh yeah? And he would go do it. He's running into traffic.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know that the kids were, making fun of him or things like that. So I would tend to be sarcastic so that he would stop, pause, look at me and say, Dad, wait a minute. You don't really mean that, do you? And I would go, or do I? And he would laugh, but it helped him, because he started understanding the nuance. Trying to teach a kid on the spectrum nuance is really hard to do. But now he does. He gets it. He gets it. He can kind of sense when people are not being truthful with him, or if they're sincere. He can really do really well with that. And he's been doing amazing. We worked very, very closely with our schools that he was a part of, and the schools, I have to say, they were fantastic. But every year with a new school and or a new group of people, depending on what grade he was in, we would have to say, we would have to say to them, all right, just so you know, we're very hands-on. We're not the parents who think our kid is always right and everyone's wrong. We will be there, we will agree with you when our kid is wrong the same way, So trust me, we want to work for all of us together for the benefit of Ethan. And once they understood that, oh my gosh, their shoulders relaxed. They were happy to help us. We had a wonderful takes a village mentality of working with Ethan and keeping him on the straight and narrow and helping him figure out stuff. And of course, he's going through everything else that every other kid goes through.
Which isn't easy
On its own. But,
yeah,
puberty and girls and relationships with other people and what are real friendships about, understanding a fake friendship versus a real one, and understanding, oh, that's a schoolmate, but not necessarily a friend. Oh, right. This is a friend because we do stuff away from school with them and they contribute to the friendship versus it being one-sided. All those different aspects are, we had a lot of doctors that would ask us to write about it. And I'm going to start public speaking about it as well, because they said, you guys have a lot of techniques that we really don't know about. And I said, well, I'm coming at it from training in improv at the Groundling School up in LA.
Yeah. And
from a theatrical background, from creativity background. So we came up with our own ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have asked us to talk about, expand upon it. And again, the joke is, when you're going to write the book? I'm like, you know what, right now I'm really enjoying just being a parent. I mean, just in scope of awareness, you still have people that don't fully understand autism. If you and I, John, are having, say I'm Superman and you and I are having a conversation, it'd be very easy for you to tune out everybody else and concentrate on our conversation. That's a social skill. That's something we actually learn. But for an autistic person, every conversation around us is just as important because they can hear them. So they are consciously going, I must pay attention to John. I must pay attention to John. I must not look over at what's happening over there. I must get rid of that. They're very consciously having to drown out those other things. So when you saw Dustin Hoffman talking and looking up at ceilings and walls in the movie Rain Man, he was mimicking what a lot of autistic people do. If they look at an inanimate object or a wall or a ceiling, that's not giving them endless amount of information coming in at them. Okay, so they can concentrate then on what they're hearing from the person they're talking with.
Interesting.
If I'm looking at you and you are talking to me right now, and this is for anybody, what we don't realize is a million bits of information are coming at us.
Right. Absolutely.
Not just the inflection of your voice, but also, are you leaning forward? Are you passive? Are you slightly tired? Are your eyes opening up? Did a certain word or phrase spark your interest more than something else? Do I see disagreement in your face? Do I see he's got a question? There's so many. Yeah. Imagine all that information being hurled at you second after second after second. Well, for an autistic person, that's like a landslide. That's an iceberg coming at them. So for them to try to look somewhere else and then they can concentrate, they can bring it down. And ironically enough, all of these things I'm talking to you about is everything that I deal with, you deal with, and every other performer deals with on stage.
That's it for part 1 of my interview with comedy magician Chipper Lowell. Tune in next Monday for part 2. You'll love it.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.